This KFAN podcast is sponsored by Builders and Remodelers, exclusive Twin Cities provider of Elements Windows. Get the highest quality windows at unmatchable value. Visit buildersandremodelers.com for more details.
This is your Why Bears Week Matters leader fan radio network.
Okay.
And KFAN.com. 2 minutes and 7 seconds past the hour of 3 o'clock Central Daylight Time. We welcome you back to an in-studio edition of the Bumper to Bumper program on this fine day after Labor easy for me to say, Labor Day in the Twin Cities that we affectionately refer to as Minneapolis and St. Louis Park. My name is Dan Barreiro. I am the host of the program. Guardsy produces the show. And it's a distance day. We're going all the way till 6:30 today. Looking forward to the fact that a week from yesterday, 2-hour tour, right? Because that
3 to 5
we'll be the pregame to the pregame. Monday night opener for your Minnesota Vikings against the aforementioned Monsters of the Midway. That, of course, is why officially today starts Bears Week.
To that point, do you know what follows us tonight at 6:30? What was your favorite fan on demand on the air moment?
Is it the return of Sludge and Lake?
No.
Oh.
Not yet.
Okay.
Vikings Country.
It's back already?
Vikings Country. Yeah, it's a game week. Vikings Country.
And let me see if I can take a stab at who the guest is tonight.
Well, I won't be able to answer it, but you can guess.
Jared Allen.
Hall of Famer Jared Allen.
That's right. That's true. No, probably be a current player, we think.
Usually is.
Yeah.
Yep, usually is. So I get details on where.
Okay.
But I looked over
That's
to the
tonight.
schedule to my left, and it's Vikings Country.
I thought it always started after the first week of the season. Is this a little early this year?
I don't remember.
Okay, good to know. So we stay with local programming, which is even better. So it is Bears Week, which ordinarily is always big because even if they've not been a dominant team lately in the division, it's the Chicago Bears. It's the Monsters of the Midway. There's a great history between these two clubs, and there's been a lot of, let's be honest, misadventures over the decades when we've gone to Soldier Field, even with, one would say, superior teams to the teams that the Bears have fielded. But for me, it goes deeper than that. Why this particular Bears Week is so crucial and should be considered as important as I believe it is. Did you happen to read the wise old owl Mark Craig's piece that dropped over the weekend regarding the backup quarterback? Did you look at it?
I did not read that one.
Like most of his pieces, it's thought provoking and it raises some interesting issues and some history. And it plays off I don't know who said it first. Who was the first guy to say that the most important position on any football team is quarterback and the second most important position is backup quarterback?
I don't remember who coined that.
Somebody said it. In fact, he may be in this story and I have misplaced it. But I bring it up because it's become kind of a cliche, and I don't know if I necessarily believe it, because it almost needs to be uttered with an asterisk, right?
Ernie Accorsi
said it. Thank you. It's a long-time legendary football personnel guy, right? Ernie Accorsi. Remember him well. I think he's still alive. I don't mean he's gone. I don't think he's died. Anyway, let's face it. Let's go back. Let's stay within the division, okay? How many years was the second most important position on a number of good to excellent Green Bay Packers team? Did it matter who the backup quarterback was?
Almost none.
Yep. Almost none. That's the essence. That's the essence of luck regarding this discussion. Obviously, if you lose your starting quarterback to injury, then the backup quarterback becomes, by definition, the second most important on the team. But if, as happens most times go through the list of great quarterbacks who generally have stayed upright for whatever reason, serendipity, happenstance, luck, the football gods. I mean, go all the way back to Joe Montana, for God's sake. Even Steve Young basically stayed healthy in San Francisco. Favre stayed healthy in San Francisco. Aaron Rodgers, except for when we cheap shotted him. Barr, by the way, who just announced his retirement from football.
Yep.
Cheap shotted him, stayed relatively healthy. Brady he had one bad injury, right? And it did knock him out for that season. And by the way, their backup quarterback, who then we got at one point, what was his name? Castle, was pretty effective for them.
They were 11-5
and didn't make the playoffs because the AFC was so deep. So I think you catch my drift here. It can be overrated. Always helpful to have one. But what's interesting about this conversation is he does a deep dive, does Craig, on our backup quarterback history, right?
It's pretty wild.
It's wild and it's distinguished, and it's going to lead to my larger point if you give me a minute. He goes all the way back to Bob Lee, who was Fran Tarkenton's backup in, I guess it was 1977. Tarkenton suffers a broken leg eventually. And Lee goes 3-1 to finish the regular season, beat the Packers in a blizzard in Green Bay, completing 5 of 8 passes down the stretch for 58 yards, including a 40-yard go-ahead strike to Sammy White. Passer rating, 129.2. The Vikings only scored 13, but it was in a blizzard, right? He was also the winning quarterback in the Mud Bowl against the Rams. Now, the numbers weren't that big, but because it was a different era, it was much more running football than passing era. He goes forward from there. How about Whiskey Wade Wilson? 1987, Wilson steps in, as Craig writes, for the injured Tommy Kramer. He goes 5-2, and the Vikings end up backing into the playoffs that year, if you recall, then go on that wondrous run to the NFC title game before losing after Darren Nelson's dropped potential tying touchdown pass in the final minute. But he was tremendous. Tremendous enough that we stuck with him as the starter the following year in 88. How about Randall Cunningham? 1998. Brad Johnson sprains an ankle in the second week. We go with the guy who I think was laying brick in Vegas, wasn't he?
Yep.
Randall Cunningham.
He was out of football.
Former MVP, but well out of football at that point. And the rest is history. Vikings under Randall Cunningham go 13-1. He wins league MVP honors. The Vikings reach the NFC title game. Then we know it was wide left. Case Keenum. Our guy, Case bleeping Keenum. 2017 season. He comes in for your guy, Sam Bradford. Remember the record he fashioned? 11-3 down the stretch. Again, NFC title game. Then it got kind of ugly in that game, did it not?
Really ugly. I was actually talking about it this morning.
Oh, were you?
Score the first touchdown, feel great.
And then they never scored again.
He's
correct?
got big balls.
So what's the moral of the story? The moral of the story is, over the decades, I've been here certainly, and even going back a little further to the Bob Lee example, the Vikings have done a much better job, actually, maybe a well above average job, of identifying and taking advantage of legitimate backup quarterback play, leading them to relative success that they clearly would not have had given the injury to the main quarterback. But what the trap that has laid for the Vikings historically is what? Well, he was awfully good that first year. Do we bring Case Keenum back? Wade Wilson led us to what he led us in 87. Now, in all honesty, I think Wade Wilson was a career backup quarterback who was one of the best backup quarterbacks maybe ever, but probably wasn't a guy that you're going to win titles with over a period of years. So what we have again in his case was great job getting a backup that gave you a chance, but it opened the door to maybe sticking with him too long, put off the process of we got to draft or develop a young quarterback who isn't brought in as a backup. He's brought in and identified as a guy who has a chance to be a franchise quarterback. That's what we need, because it's too easy to romanticize what these guys do. Sam Darnold last year.
Yeah.
the most recent example. You could have made an argument, bring him back. He may get benched in Seattle by week 4, on the other hand, where we again find out he's got limitations. Good run for maybe 1 year or part of 1 year, but better off as a backup. So what does Bears week and the 2025 season, what does this accentuate more than ever? You have what you have identified and believe is a franchise quarterback, a young franchise quarterback that you went up into the draft to get, so that you don't have to live and die with, look how good we are. You don't want to just be good at identifying backups. What do you want to be better at? Finding a young franchise quarterback that you can go to the well with over and over and over again, the way the Packers have done now for 3 generations of quarterbacks, if you want to believe the current guy has a chance to be anywhere near as good as the last 2, and that's called into question, but he's been pretty good.
Well, I'd say not even the last 2 is a tough bar.
Yes.
Because it's Favre and Rodgers, but they've won a lot of games with him. And
correct.
He's been, even though I'm not the biggest fan of his, they've won a lot of games with him, and
right.
It looks like he is their next guy for a while.
Yeah.
So they've done it.
So they have done it. And that's what this whole season, starting with Bears week, represents, right? Is maybe not having to be. Sure, you want to have, and maybe we'll find out that Wentz is a legitimate backup. But you want to believe the football gods aren't going to force you to have to play him. Because what you have in theory now is a guy who can be your starter for a long period of time. And so then your history doesn't have to be about who came in and rescued you and did, in many cases that we just laid out, a fine job. But nevertheless, that's not what you want at the top of your resume. That you are go back to the Denny Green era. What were we doing? We were looking at aging veteran quarterbacks well past their prime, hoping we could milk something else out of them, not the franchise guy. And this is why I don't blame Vikings fans for being excited about this kid and maybe even romanticizing and exaggerating already what they think he can do, because it's such a different feel. Because if you read the Craig piece, he's sort of laying out the best of Vikings football, and almost every time it came with a guy who didn't start the season as a starter. And that's cool. There's some good mythology with that, but it underscores that what you haven't been able to do is have somebody out there long enough to become the man. Young enough that you can build and build around and develop to say, we're not going to be, having to worry about whether our backup guy can come in. Now, again, the football gods could come down hard on us, and there could be another injury week 2, right? I mean, you never know about that. But that's what this Bears week, the start of this season, represents. And I just thought this piece did a good job of explaining that in a sort of, hidden way, because the emphasis is more on what the value of a backup quarterback. And we've been really good at that.
Yeah.
We haven't been particularly good at finding, identifying, and building on, we're going to have guess what we're going to do? Dante's the exception, obviously, and then he got hurt.
Right.
But we're going to have the same. Our goal here is to have the same guy for 10 years. Not a guy we get off the scrap heap somewhere else that we think could be a bridge quarterback. We don't want any more bridge quarterbacks. We want a franchise quarterback. So that's what starts with Bears week this week. Are we putting a grand in anybody's hand today?
Not today.
Okay.
Get ready to laugh out loud. Gabriel Iglesias is bringing his comedy tour to Treasure Island Resort and Casino live September 6th and 7th in the business. We call that this weekend. Don't miss your chance to see one of the world's funniest comedians. Tickets available at ticasino.com.
Johnny Athletic will join at 5:30 tonight, and Kevin Seifert at the bottom of this hour. Is he on the phone today or coming in? Do we know?
I believe it's phone.
Okay.
I believe it's phone this week.
Seifert at 3:30. Glenn Mason tomorrow, is that confirmed?
3:30.
Nice.
In
He's back.
studio.
Mason, your face returns tomorrow. Sean Salisbury returns Thursday. It's all coming together for us. I have to disagree with you, Dan writes, 763 guy. I feel like teams should invest very little into the backup QB. Why pay a backup QB any amount of money when you could invest it into a player that you know will play, especially when 90% of the time that you do not need to turn to a backup quarterback, it can be a death sentence on your season. Well, no, he's actually, believe it or not, 763 guy, you're actually agreeing with me. The point I made was the cliche that people like to repeat. Second most important position on the team is backup quarterback. Sounds cool, and it can be true. But the fact of the matter is, the number of teams that have succeeded year after year by luck with just a great starter, it's endless. That list is endless. So I always would prefer to have a decent option at backup QB, but the fact is there are a lot of teams I can't name. Can anybody name the backup quarterbacks to Brett Favre all those years? He was an Iron Man in Green Bay. I can't.
One of them was Doug Peterson, right?
That's true. Doug Peterson would have been one of them. That's
but I only know that because he went on to be a great coach, and we told the story.
Yeah. So, no,
Gary Kubiak was behind Elway. Same thing, right?
Exactly.
You only know him because he's a coach, not because he was a player.
So 763, you're actually agreeing with me. You're actually making the point. I'm not my whole point wasn't to debate how much money you spend on the position, but more to say this history, certainly post-Tarkenton, tells you the entire quarterback story for this team when it's really more about backup quarterbacks coming out of nowhere to help than it is a starting quarterback who is meant from the beginning to be a starting quarterback. And that's what the Vikings finally are hoping they are changing with the number one guy. In fact, Kyle from Isanti writes, we have two franchise quarterbacks.
Oh.
McCarthy and Brosmer.
Yeah, I didn't write that.
And
That's not my burner.
He didn't even name them in that order. He went Brosmer and McCarthy. So
some would say that.
It might be your burner account.
It is wild that so many backups, though, like you mentioned, the 5 NFC championship games in my lifetime. I remember 4 of them. I don't remember 87. But if I'm doing my math right, and we know that's not always right, it's 60% of the QBs were backups.
That's correct. Right? Favre obviously was not.
Favre was
the exception to the rule.
Dante was 2000.
Correct.
Right?
Yes, that was 41 donut.
The other 3 weren't the quarterbacks when they started. And Case Keenum lost to the quarterback that was also a backup, Nick Foles.
That's true.
It's amazing how many backups have won Super Bowls.
Yeah,
Jeff Hostetler, I'm sure you were there in Tampa.
Yeah, that's true.
91.
Yeah.
Kurt Warner, maybe the most famous. Just a guy waiting for a chance.
I guess he started as a bad.
Trent Green got hurt.
A guy. Yeah, you're right.
Trent Green got hurt in preseason.
But he became more than a caretaker. Like, do we keep going with him? He had a pretty good run once he started, right?
I think they won the Super Bowl his first year.
So, because somebody said, well, you wanted Keenum back. I said, yeah, I did, actually. But I never was under the illusion that Keenum was like a career starter.
No.
It was, maybe it's the perfect place, perfect time, and you figured something out with him.
Yeah.
But it was always going to be at best one more year, probably with Keenum, maybe 2.
And he didn't do much in Denver when they gave him the big money.
That's true. He didn't.
He's still hanging on as a backup. And
he's
full
with the
disclosure.
Bears. Speaking of Bears week, I think he's the number 3 QB.
Full disclosure, I'm sure 15 to 20% of your interest is we just didn't want to have to worry about breaking in a new Viking for the Vikings report on Mondays because we had such a great deal with Keenum.
That's true.
He almost did it out of superstition, so we were locked in for Mondays with Case.
Yes,
if he came back, which would have been great.
By the way, let me turn. I got to turn my my text machine down. Although this is a good source. This is a very good Bob Hagan reminder. When the Packers won the Super Bowl, can you name Favre's backup QB?
So in 96, who was that?
Because I remember he was with this team, but I did not remember that this was the year he was with this team.
I'm sure I know it, but...
The punky QB, Jim McMahon.
Was he really?
That's what... Hagen's never wrong.
No, he's not.
He's never wrong.
I trust him.
Yeah, for sure. That's a good little nugget.
Wow.
Yeah. Who knew?
Was he our starter before or after that? Had to have been before.
Before.
Early 90s?
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember those games.
Yeah, I can. I got on that bandwagon, man, as the Bears guy. I was like, yeah, what the hell? Why not? And it didn't go very well here. He never had a great arm to start with, but his arm by then was pretty much shot.
They made the playoffs a year or two with him, didn't they?
They did?
I think so. I think one of the early Denny losses. I feel like they lost to Washington at home with him, or maybe the Bears. I can't remember.
By the way, we may get back into this with Seifert. Speaking of quarterback position, did you read or listen to the Tom Brady comments on a current National Football League quarterback?
I didn't see that.
Interesting commentary regarding your guy, A-Raj. Aaron Rodgers.
Really?
Yes, I thought it was actually some pretty. I'm hoping, by the way, he's coming out of his shell a little bit this year. Although I thought he was actually by the end of last season too.
I thought he was fine as the year went on.
Yeah, he got better. And he wasn't awful from the beginning.
No, he was just okay.
There's no question about that.
But he can still bring you things that most people can't.
Let me correct myself and apologize to a listener. I had quoted from the Mark Craig piece that the Randall Cunningham year, 98, he won league MVP that year. He didn't win league MVP that year. He was second in MVP voting. I think he was might have been offensive player of the year, one of those kind of other classifications. But the MVP that year in close voting went to Terrell Davis, the Denver running back.
That's right.
And then Cunningham was second. I think Moss was fourth or fifth that year.
And he was rookie of the year.
Yep. Yeah. So I doubted the person who was attempting to correct me, but indeed, there you have it. And somebody is bringing up Tarkenton and saying, well, Dan, you're forgetting about him. No, that Tarkenton was a franchise quarterback. I'm talking basically, he kind of proves the point too, as the exception to the rule. I'm saying post-Tark. Now, Tommy Kramer, I think, had a chance. He had some really good years and I think, they brought him in he was going to be a franchise quarterback. And that was the plan with him. And he had some good years. And then he kind of faded. And then he got hurt in 87 and never was able to regain the job from Wade Wilson and then moved on at that point as well. All right, let's get to our bottom of the hour break. There's a lot to catch up on with Seifert because he's one of those fair boycotters. So
that's right.
I want to get caught up with him on some stuff he has written because the Vikings, frankly, since the end of training camp, they've made a number of personnel changes that are pretty interesting to discuss, including, of course, the backup quarterback decision, the Thielen trade, etc. So we'll cover all of it and Bears Week with our guy, Kevin Seifert. He is next.
Comedy icon Adam Sandler is bringing his You're My Best Friend tour to XL Energy Center on October 22nd. I think by then it'll be Grand Casino. Don't miss out on brand new jokes, classic bits, and maybe even a song or two. And tickets are on sale now. Full details are at KFAN.com, keyword calendar.
Questions for Kevin Seifert as we start Bears Week? Hit the Bradshaw and Bryant KFAN text line at 646-86. Before we say hi to Kevin, we had a great fair run again, as we talked about several times, especially late in it. The one complaint I did hear the most of relatively few complaints on our production meeting was they miss the occasional phone call. So I don't know that there's Common takes some calls, right? Still, I think occasionally. PA doesn't.
Yeah, a few.
Does a Power Trip take any?
No.
PA does not, and we have gone to not. So I don't know. Maybe we'll reconsider that position at a given time. We'll see. Some calls we do take, and Seifert's is one of them. He joins us on the Connecticut Water Services Hotline. I'll be honest with you. You've spoiled us. Because I much prefer looking at your smiling mug across from me in the studio. Is that over? Is that honeymoon period over, or is it just some days, some weeks, the schedule's just too complicated?
Yes, today was a little complicated, but I fully anticipate coming to visit you and Garzi, the producer, as often as I can, if not every week.
Okay, that's good. That's outstanding to hear. That's very, very good. All right. Where do we want?
All I do is give. That's all I do.
No, I'm not going to do the. I'm going to rise above the cheap shot, the State Fair cheap shots that I was going to do. Did your wife tell you I ran into her and she was giving me grief for giving you grief about the State Fair stuff? Basically, she was unhappy with my State Fair terrorism. She said.
Isn't that what every person dreams of? Is their wife in public defending their controversial stances?
Yes, that's it exactly.
I don't know if life gets any better than that.
The weather couldn't have been better.
Is that right?
Yeah, I'm just saying.
And I will say, like, it was a great summer in general, because I was just telling somebody that usually at the end of training camp, I'm pretty worn out, because I know no one's going to think this is a big deal, but it does take a little bit of a toll when you're standing in the 95-degree heat and or humidity and direct sun over the course of a few weeks. And I felt great at the end of camp. And the weather had a big part of it. The other part was the way the Vikings spoil us and this year they put us in an elevated tent on the sideline, so we weren't even in the direct sun. So I'll credit the Vikings for part of that, and Mother Nature for the rest.
The famous, I think, it originated as an Ernie Accorsi quote. You've heard it quoted probably billions of times since then. The most important position on your football team is the quarterback. Second most important position is your backup quarterback. It sounds cool, and obviously, if your starter gets injured, it can absolutely be true. But what we laid out at the top of the show, I want to get your reaction to, is that the dirty little secret is dynastic franchises have had nothing at the backup quarterback position and won Super Bowls. Some of them have won more than one Super Bowl, not even worrying about it. Now, again, a lot of that's luck, but given the luck factor, can you really say that the second most important position on a football team is the backup quarterback?
I don't know if I go second, but I think it's very important, and I've been amused at some of the takes this summer where it's like, well, it doesn't matter who the Vikings have, Howell, Wentz, Brosmer. If something happens to J.J. McCarthy or he's just not ready to play yet, then their whole season's screwed anyway. And I just don't think that's the way NFL teams view it anymore.
I agree.
You know, I mean, we can all say, like, you know, it's probably over if that happens, but I don't think that they view it that way anymore. And I also don't think, especially owners, view it that way. I mean, look at the Vikings, for example. They have they're paying over $350 million in cash this year for this team, for this roster. That's how much they committed in cash to the players on their roster for this year. It's one of the top, I think it's in the top 2 or 3 of the league right now. And one reason they're able to do that is because J.J. McCarthy's contract is a rookie contract, but it's still an enormous amount of money to devote to a asset that you're basically going to throw your hands up if one guy gets hurt, or one guy isn't as good as you thought he was going to be, or isn't good enough yet. I just think that that's not the way they think anymore. I know for a fact, because Mark Wilf was on the record after the 2023 season saying he did not think that Kirk Cousins' Achilles injury that year was in any way an excuse for the record that they ended up with at the end of that season. And we can argue about whether that's fair or not, or whether it's just, you know, owners, you know, wanting to hold somebody accountable. But that's not the way they think about it anymore. No. And so if something were to happen, they're not going to just throw up their hands and say, well, we spent $350 million for nothing, we'll go back at it next year. Like, they're going to expect, whether it's Carson Wentz or Max Brosmer or whatever would be the next up situation, for at least the team to compete in the short term. Maybe you're not going to the Super Bowl, but the teams have gone to the Super Bowl with their backup quarterbacks. You know, look no further than the Eagles in the Super Bowl that was here. So, you know, we can have our individual opinions on it, and that's certainly fine, but I don't think that's the way teams are necessarily viewing it anymore.
Well, you know, part of the whole promise, I think, going all the way back to the McCarthy draft, right, is if you look at the history of this team at the quarterback position, especially the last 30 years, Mark Craig had a nice piece on this over the weekend. They've made most of their positive quarterback history with backup quarterbacks. And what's missing from this history? Well, it's what J.J. McCarthy, in theory, represents, right? A guy who, if it goes well, can be, and health, you know, issues, a big part of this, can be your guy for 10 years. So that even on the occasions when, you know, but Randall Cunningham emerged, Keenum emerged. We've had several guys. Wade Wilson emerged. But then the problem with it was, well, should we hang with them then another year? Maybe we can catch lightning about 2 or 3 years. But they were all either backup players or starters, very much at their end of the career. And so it's a dangerous trap to fall into. What you're trying to avoid is having to go that route and instead go, obviously, the Green Bay Packers route, the New England Patriots route, the Rams route, I guess you could say, that they got Stafford relatively late. But that's to me, that's the moral of the story with the Vikings. They have been too dependent on a backup quarterback rising up, and then they've just had to debate whether to hang on to him and see if he's got a second life in him.
Yeah, and really the reality of Super Bowls, maybe not over that entire 30 years, but close to it, is that the winning team has a quarterback. Maybe they're not going to the Hall of Fame, but they're having a Hall of Fame season.
Right.
Whether it was even in the way Nick Foles played at the end of that Super Bowl where the Eagles got to here and won the Super Bowl against the Patriots. We all know there was a stretch where there was like a Manning or Brady or Breeze in almost every Super Bowl for over a decade. And so you're not likely to get, you're much more likely to get that performance from a quarterback you've drafted high and stuck with through thick and thin than you are going out and trying to make it happen with Brett Favre at age 40 or Warren Moon or Brad Johnsons of the world, even though he ended up going to Tampa and winning one. Just the history of the game tells you that you got to make the biggest swing when you're thinking long term.
Yeah.
But it still doesn't mean that that's your only, that's what your entire season is contingent on. And that you're not even going to be you don't care if you're in a competitive situation if that player is not out there.
Yeah. We were chatting with Kevin Seifert, be with us again weekly on Tuesdays, generally around 3:30. We have not, I don't think, spoken on air because all this broke during the fair and you didn't want to come out to the fair about the Wentz acquisition. Is it as simple as we have no idea? There's no point in romanticizing Wentz at this point in his career because he's become a journeyman player, but they clearly felt that if indeed another injury happens, Wentz gives them a better chance to do what we were just talking about, stay afloat a little bit longer than any of the other alternatives when it comes to the experienced alternatives regarding the backup position.
Yeah, and it's relative because it's compared to how good of a chance would he give you versus how good of a chance would Sam Howell have given you. And I just don't think that there was ever a point where anybody who was watching all of OTAs, or at least the ones that were open, and then all of training camp, every day of practice was open, and then watched both of the preseason games in total and listened carefully to the decision makers talking about him. And then, basically having your eyes open. Like, I don't think anyone could have said that there would be a lot of confidence if Sam Howell had to go in for a half of a regular season game, let alone take over for multiple games or an entire season. And that doesn't mean he couldn't eventually get there, but it was just kind of an awkward fit. Right. I don't know that I know the whole story of why Sam Howell was the one they ended up with at the draft. But it was definitely an awkward fit. He had never played in the scheme here. And look, the Vikings deserve credit for going out and for recognizing that and going out and getting somebody who I think objectively gives them a better chance. But it is definitely not like, even though they've done it twice in 4 years in this, the time Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah has been the general manager and Kevin O'Connell's been the head coach, it's definitely not ideal at the end of August, when all of training camp is done, to then be shaking up your roster and having a different person that's one heartbeat away, so to speak, of getting on the field. And so it had to have been a pretty significant concern on their part for them to pull the trigger in that way. And it wasn't something that no one couldn't have seen coming. So I think they ended up, as Kevin O'Connell said, in the spot they wanted to be in, which is with somebody that they had some comfort with. But I mean, don't be fooled. I mean, this is not an ideal situation by any means.
So we also haven't talked since the Thielen move was made, and the original impression I had from those, at least some of you covering the team, was it was unlikely to happen. Not because the Vikings didn't want it to, not because it wasn't logical, but because there really wasn't much logical reason for the Panthers to move on what seemed to be a pretty big asking price. So ultimately, what changed? I mean, do we think the asking price went down, the Vikings' willingness to give a little more than they were originally went up? How did it end up happening?
Frankly, it happened because Adam Thielen stepped in and took a pay cut.
Okay.
To be honest,
that's important.
I think what happened, I think what was happening, or I know what was happening, is that the Panthers, like you said, didn't have any big real desire to get to part ways with him. They would love to have him sort of mentoring their young quarterback, Bryce Young. So they asked for a lot in draft pick compensation, and the Vikings understandably were like, if you're gonna ask for that much in draft compensation, take some of the salary, pay some of Adam Thielen's salary. And the Panthers, I don't think we're willing to do that because, again, they weren't that motivated for it to happen. And I think that's where it was in a standstill for a decent amount of time. And we had a story about this over the weekend. I believe Tom Pelissero, NFL Network, reported something along the same lines as well. And so in the end, instead of the Panthers paying the salary, Adam Thielen just ate it. And that's how much he wanted to come here. That's how much he wanted to play for Kevin O'Connell and bring his family back to Minnesota. I don't think they hated it in Carolina by any stretch, but I think they all viewed it as very much a perfect epilogue to his time in the National Football League, and wanted to come back here, wanted to play with J.J. McCarthy, wanted to play for Kevin O'Connell and with Justin Jefferson, and he's made a lot of money in his career and is going to still make $5+ million this year. But I think that's what broke the final ice there.
How viable a receiving threat is he at this point?
He was actually pretty good towards the end of last season, and so I don't know how much. People haven't really seen much of him this summer, obviously, because it's just been training camp in the preseason. But and again, just real talk, like he had by the end of his final season here, he was not one of the top two targets in their offense. I think it had become Justin Jefferson and T.J. Hawkinson and K.J. Osborne as well was targeted a lot. And there were certain things that Adam, maybe did earlier in his career, but it wasn't doing as much later in his career in terms of downfield stuff. But still, I mean, they were in a situation where they were down to one receiver they trusted for week one. I mean, you just can't play that way. Nope. And so they were very, very motivated to go. I mean, they trust him that that he'll be where he's supposed to be and that he'll use every veteran trick in the book to get open, and that when they throw it to him, he'll catch it. And that if he has extra space to run, he will get that extra yardage. And I don't think that they're expecting like 1,000-yard season from him or want 1,000-yard season from him per se, but they needed reliable people to fulfill the commitment they made when they sort of elevated J.J. McCarthy to have every position manned by someone who they could trust. And I think that's where he will provide.
Ultimately, I mean, the Phillips move, I don't know if we talked about it. You refresh my memory if you and I, we've had a conversation on air.
I don't think we've talked since the '85 Super Bowl.
Pretty close. But, because you sequester yourself. I mean, we're just trying to stay with the people.
Yeah.
So, to you, what does? I mean, look, I think we get the bit that we got a lot of options. What the best teams do is they don't fall in love forever, even with viable contributors. That's sort of what was kind of the rap on the Spielman regime, I think, that you got to stay ahead of it a little bit rather than behind it a little bit. On the other hand, the guy's played for, since he's been here, like all the time. So, yeah. I mean, how much of a gamble do you think this is, even if there are, obviously there's a financial benefit for going the route that they did and sending him away?
I mean, it's a risk if multiple players get hurt. I think they were in a spot at that position, the interior defensive line. And remember, for the most part, unless they're like in goal line or short yardage, there usually are only two defensive linemen on the field in this scheme, the vast majority of the time at least. And they felt like they had the two guys they signed, Hargrave and John Allen, and then there was at least three, if not up to five, younger defensive linemen that they felt comfortable, maybe not in week one, but that over the course of the season they could put out there. And they would be a little more flexible and, maybe not as stout against the run as Harrison Phillips was, but certainly people they could put out there and run their defense. And so Harrison Phillips was not going to play. We kind of joked, that he played every play. He was not going to play every play this year. So his playing time was definitely going to be down. And I think he even acknowledged that early in the offseason once those guys signed. Like, I don't think anyone was confused about that. But it also, we talked earlier about the $350 million in cash that they're spending. It's the different number from salary cap, but I think the last time I looked, they were more above the cap for next year than any other team in the NFL.
Interesting.
I mean, it always comes back to haunt you, and they'll be able to roll over a fair bit of money into that. So it gets into a lot of things. We don't have to get into details, but right now, it always comes home to roost one way or the other. And so this is not bad cap management. It's not bad negotiating. It's how they have managed to spend as much money as they are on this roster and keep it under the cap for this year. And so one thing that trading him now allows them to do was an immediate $7.5 million off of that figure for next year, because he was signed through next year. So I think that was a little bit of part of it as well. But I don't think that it was like an easy decision to do it, because he's a captain last year, and they really liked what he brought in the locker room, and he was definitely going to play some. And if there were multiple injuries, he might have played a lot. But it was probably their one position of surplus that they could then pick up some salary cap relief for the future and some extra draft picks to help with this Thielen trade and some of the other deals that they were considering.
All right, this is the official start of Bears Week. You've covered a lot of them over the years, and my angle on this might change. By the end of the week, I might feel completely differently about it than I do today. But today, at the start of Bears Week, this is the most important angle to me. I look at this game on paper. I think the Vikings, by the way, are 1.5-point favorites, at least right now. Yeah, and I say to myself, as much as we talked about JJ, and there's great curiosity in the offense and whether we're going to transition into more of a bruising offense occasionally, etc. The story of this game in the Vikings' favor should, to me, simply be this. You have the established, experienced defense. You've added even a couple pieces to it that should make it even better than it was a year ago. They've got, the genius offensive coordinator, now head coach or offensive mind, but the Bears haven't really established anything yet. Caleb Williams hasn't established anything yet at the line of scrimmage. To me, the story is that's where you win this game. You absolutely should be the dominant part of this game. Vikings defense not giving this offense, especially early in the season, a chance to feel good about itself. Am I wrong?
No, I think you're correct. Very correct. I think you've established where I think a lot of Vikings advantage, if they're going to have one in the beginning of the season, is going to be defensively. And I think I saw the over/under is like 43 or 43.5 or something like that. If that finishes under, then the Vikings, I think that's going to finish under regardless. Yeah. But I think this is the kind of game that as will be many games, that the defense is really going to have to hold the opponents like under 20 points. Mm-hmm. And if you need 30 points from the Vikings offense, that's going to be asking a lot. And with a developing young quarterback. Sure. And so that's where and that's what's interesting about, to me, when you dig into what you're talking about, is that I think, is it Brian Flores 0-4 in his last 4 games when Ben Johnson was calling the plays in Detroit? Yeah. Ben Johnson was not the original offensive coordinator there, but maybe the 4 games that Flores has been the Vikings defensive coordinator when they play Detroit, and Ben Johnson's calling the plays 0-4. And so people were like, oh, he's got his number. Well, I think a lot of that was Jared Goff also.
Yes, exactly.
And if you look at the quarterbacks that seem to have the success against the Flores defense, it's the ones who aren't fazed by the chaos and have seen it all before, whether it's Stafford or Jared Goff. I mean, even Aaron Rodgers didn't necessarily look like he knew what he was seeing every time. But those are the quarterbacks that have been able to, in real time, sort of calmly tune out the noise that is very much a part of the Flores scheme, and know where the soft spots are. And so, is Caleb Williams at that point yet? Even if that's what Ben Johnson is probably trying to teach him, and that'll be the crux of the game in my mind.
My sources say the game's Monday night. You're going in Saturday to have a big weekend in Chicago in the Windy City. Is that true?
No, I will be heading in Sunday.
Oh, that's not bad.
I'm all about the travel budget. I like to keep it as tight as possible. And then, but I think I'll should be able to get there in time for the end of the Sunday night game, and then
nice.
And then
there you go.
we'll have all day coverage on ESPN and ABC of the pregame, game, and the postgame.
Have a wonderful time in Chicago. We'll chat next week. Thanks, Seifert.
Okay, Dan.
Kevin Seifert, ESPN.com, helping us, usher in what we like to very affectionately call Bears Week. Shouldn't be a concern about bear weather at Soldier Field on Sunday. Although it's supposed to get chillier here. I'll double check to see what the
We're in the 60s starting tomorrow.
In Chicago, too?
I don't know about Chicago.
I'm wondering, but I don't think it's going to be like 40s and snow flurries. I don't think we have to worry about it being that cold. That's what we classify. Bear weather is what? Like minus 17 wind chill, historically, that sort of thing? Or early enough in the calendar that I don't think that should necessarily be a problem.